My beloved child. Something happened last night that your heart may not be ready to hear. Someone saw your soulmate when they thought nobody was watching, and what made the moment unforgettable wasn't simply who they were with, it was the expression on their face when your name entered the conversation. Don't skip this, because the first detail that came out sounds ordinary, but it leads somewhere you absolutely would not expect. They weren't moving through that moment like someone who had forgotten you. In fact, the opposite seemed true. They appeared distracted, emotionally distant, almost as if part of them was somewhere else. And then, something was said that changed the entire atmosphere. Your soulmate suddenly became quiet. They looked down. They hesitated before answering. That hesitation revealed more than any confident explanation ever could. Stay till the end, because there is one detail about the person they were with that may completely change how you understand what happened last night. Something huge is waiting for you. At first, the person watching them assumed it was just an ordinary meeting. Nothing seemed unusual. But then your soulmate received a message, looked at the screen, and their entire expression shifted. It was the kind of reaction people have when a message touches something deeply personal. They didn't immediately respond. They simply stared at it for several seconds. Then they put the phone away. Why? Because the message wasn't something they could casually explain. And this is where the story takes a turn. The person sitting with them asked, "Are you okay?" Your soulmate reportedly smiled and said they were fine, but that answer didn't match their eyes. There was emotion underneath it. Regret. Longing. And perhaps a realization they had been trying to avoid. Don't skip, because the person beside them eventually asked the question your soulmate had been hoping nobody would ask. The question was about you. And when your soulmate heard your name, everything changed. They didn't laugh it off. They didn't change the subject immediately. Instead, they became unusually serious. They admitted that they still think about you more than they let people know. But there was another confession. One they apparently weren't prepared to make until that exact moment. They revealed that something about you has been weighing on their heart, and the person beside them finally understood why your soulmate has been acting differently lately. This wasn't simply about missing someone. It was about a decision they've been quietly considering. A decision that could bring two people closer after a long period of uncertainty. But just when the conversation seemed to reach its most important moment, the person who was with your soulmate revealed something they had discovered earlier, something your soulmate never expected them to know. Stay till the end, because that revelation may explain exactly who they were with, and why last night could become a turning point in your story. There was a moment last night when your soulmate realized they couldn't keep pretending everything was normal. The person sitting across from them had already noticed the change in their behavior, and after hearing your name, they asked something that made your soulmate pause for a long time. They asked whether you were the reason they had been so emotionally distracted lately. Your soulmate didn't answer immediately. Instead, they looked away, took a breath, and finally admitted that there was something they hadn't told anyone. Something connected to you. Something they had been carrying quietly because they didn't know how you would react if you discovered the truth. Don't skip, because this is where the story becomes much more personal. The person with them wasn't simply asking questions, they already knew part of the story. They had seen something, heard something, or noticed something that your soulmate thought had remained completely private. And when they finally revealed what they knew, your soulmate's reaction said everything. But here's what makes last night so surprising. The person your soulmate was with may not have been there for romance at all. They may have been there because your soulmate needed someone they trusted enough to talk to. Someone who could listen without judging them. Someone who knew about the connection between you two. Your soulmate apparently spoke about a memory involving you that still affects them more than they expected. They described a moment when you made them feel understood, valued, or genuinely seen. And then came the part that changed the conversation. They admitted that they sometimes wonder whether they made the wrong choice by staying silent. That sentence carried more weight than everything before it. Because silence can protect someone for a while, but eventually it becomes a burden. Stay till the end, because the next part of this conversation revealed what your soulmate actually wants to do about those feelings, and it wasn't what the person sitting beside them expected to hear. Then the person with your soulmate asked one final question: if they came back into your life tomorrow, would you choose them? Your soulmate became completely quiet. No quick answer. No nervous joke. Just silence. And after several seconds, they gave an answer that revealed something they had been hiding even from themselves. They said they wouldn't want to lose the opportunity to make things right. They admitted that if you gave them one genuine chance, they would want to have a conversation they had been postponing for far too long. But there was still one unanswered question: why were they with this person last night in the first place? The answer is where everything connects. The person beside your soulmate had apparently encouraged them to stop waiting for the perfect moment and finally face what they truly feel. Your soulmate left that conversation different from the way they entered it. And before the night ended, something happened that could be the clearest sign yet that their next move may involve you. Last night didn't end with the conversation you've just heard about. In fact, the most important moment came after your soulmate thought the discussion was over. They were alone for a few minutes, and that was when their emotions finally caught up with them. They looked at their phone again, opened your conversation, and stayed there without typing anything. They seemed to be fighting an internal battle, one side wanting to reach out immediately, the other reminding them of everything that happened before. Don't skip, because this small moment reveals something powerful. They weren't simply thinking about you. They were thinking about what it would mean to finally tell you the truth. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the next revelation explains why they may have been holding back for so long. What happened next was even more unexpected. The person who had been with your soulmate came back into the room and noticed that your soulmate was still looking at the phone. Instead of asking another question, they simply said something that made your soulmate look up immediately: you already know what you want. That sentence hit differently. Your soulmate didn't argue. They didn't deny it. They simply became quiet again. Then they admitted that the hardest part wasn't knowing how they felt about you. The hardest part was wondering whether you still felt the same way. That fear had been controlling more of their actions than you ever realized. They were afraid of reaching out and discovering that you had moved on emotionally. They were afraid that the door they had once left open might now be closed. And yet, despite that fear, they were still considering making a move. Then came the detail that nobody expected. Before leaving, your soulmate reportedly made a promise to themselves. They would stop looking for reasons to stay silent. They would find a way to communicate what they had been unable to say. But there was one condition: they wanted to know whether you were still open to hearing them. That's why the person beside them suggested something simple: start with one honest message, not a dramatic confession. One message that could reopen the conversation without forcing anything. Your soulmate listened carefully, and before the night ended, they looked at your name one more time. They didn't send anything yet, but they didn't close the conversation either. That tiny decision may seem insignificant, but it could be the beginning of something much bigger. Don't skip the next part, because there's another person connected to this story, and what they know about your soulmate could explain why this entire situation has been unfolding behind the scenes. Something changed the moment your soulmate heard one particular detail from the person they were with last night. Until that point, they had been speaking as though their feelings were something they could simply manage, something they could keep hidden until the timing felt right. But then the other person mentioned something they had noticed about you recently, and your soulmate's entire expression shifted. They suddenly wanted to know more. They asked questions. Where were you? How had you been doing? Were you still thinking about them? Had you moved on? Those weren't casual questions. They were questions from someone who was quietly afraid that they might have waited too long. Don't skip, because the next revelation connects directly to why your soulmate was seen with this person in the first place. And if you've been wondering whether last night was random, stay till the end, because it wasn't. The person with your soulmate then told them something your soulmate apparently wasn't expecting to hear: you may not be as emotionally distant as they had convinced themselves. That information immediately changed the tone of the conversation. Your soulmate became more open, admitting that they had spent far too much time imagining the worst instead of simply finding out the truth. They confessed that there were words they wished they had said earlier, moments they wished they had handled differently, and opportunities they now realized they may have taken for granted. But the most emotional part came when they admitted that one memory of you still stays with them. It isn't necessarily the biggest moment you shared. It was something small, something you probably thought they had forgotten. They remembered it. They remembered how you made them feel. And suddenly, the person beside them understood that this wasn't a passing emotion. This had been sitting inside your soulmate for much longer than anyone realized. Before they left, the conversation reached its most important point. The person with your soulmate asked whether they were finally ready to stop hiding behind uncertainty. Your soulmate looked at their phone again and said they wanted to talk to you, but they wanted the conversation to be genuine. No games. No pretending. No carefully chosen words designed to protect their pride. They wanted to tell you what they had actually been feeling. And then came the detail that could change everything. They began thinking about the exact way they would start that conversation. Not someday. Not, maybe later. They were mentally preparing for it. Don't skip, because this is where the mystery of who they were with starts to make sense. The person beside them wasn't simply a witness to their emotions. They may have been the one person who pushed your soulmate toward a decision they had been avoiding. And what your soulmate decided after that conversation could be the reason you're about to hear from them in a way you never expected. By the time the night was almost over, your soulmate had stopped trying to convince themselves that everything was fine. The person they had been with had asked the questions they had been avoiding, and now there was nowhere left to hide from their own feelings. Your soulmate admitted that they had been replaying certain moments with you again and again, wondering what would have happened if they had spoken sooner. They remembered your voice, your reactions, even the little things you probably never realized they noticed. But then they said something that changed the entire meaning of the night. They admitted they weren't only afraid of losing you, they were afraid that you might eventually stop believing in them. Don't skip, because that confession explains why their silence may have lasted longer than you expected. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the most important part of the story hasn't happened yet. Then the person beside them asked what they would do if you never reached out first. Your soulmate didn't hesitate this time. They said they couldn't keep waiting for a sign from you while doing nothing themselves. They knew that if they wanted clarity, they had to become brave enough to ask for it. The conversation became quieter after that. Your soulmate looked at their phone, opened your name, and began writing something. They typed a few words, stopped, deleted them, and started again. This happened more than once. Every version sounded too formal, too emotional, or simply didn't say what they truly wanted to say. Finally, they stopped trying to create the perfect message. They decided that honesty mattered more than perfection. And that was the moment the person beside them realized your soulmate had genuinely made a decision. They weren't talking about you anymore as someone from their past. They were talking about you as someone they still wanted in their future. But just before they could finish what they wanted to send, another thought stopped them. Your soulmate remembered something that had happened between you before. Something that made them wonder whether you would even trust their words this time. They became emotional and admitted that if they came back into your life, they didn't want to repeat old patterns. They wanted to prove their intentions through actions instead of promises. That sentence revealed the deepest truth of the entire night: your soulmate wasn't simply missing you. They were beginning to understand what they needed to change within themselves. And the person who had been with them last night had witnessed that realization firsthand. Before they separated, your soulmate made one final decision that could eventually bring this hidden story into the open. They chose not to erase your conversation, not to walk away, and not to pretend they felt nothing. They left with one thought repeating in their mind: if they were given one real opportunity to speak to you, they would finally tell you what they had been too afraid to say. The next morning, your soulmate woke up carrying the weight of everything they had said the night before. What happened wasn't something they could simply forget after a few hours of sleep. Their first instinct was to reach for their phone, and once again, your name was there. But this time, something was different. They weren't looking at your conversation because they were confused. They were looking because they had finally accepted what they felt. Don't skip, because this is the moment when last night's mystery starts turning into something much more real. The person who was with your soulmate didn't just hear their confession, they helped them recognize something they had been avoiding. Your soulmate had been waiting for certainty, but they finally realized certainty doesn't always arrive before you make a choice. Sometimes, you have to be honest first. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and the decision that followed may explain what happens next. Your soulmate then remembered the final words spoken before they separated. The person beside them had told them not to make another decision based on fear. Those words stayed in their mind. Your soulmate had spent so much time wondering what could go wrong that they had forgotten to consider what could go right. They started thinking about the possibility of speaking with you without expectations, without pressure, and without trying to control your response. They wanted to simply tell you the truth and allow you to decide what came next. That realization brought an unexpected sense of calm. Instead of overthinking every possible outcome, they began thinking about one simple question: what would I regret not saying? And the answer was you. Not because everything between you had been perfect, but because something about your connection still felt unfinished to them. That unfinished feeling was exactly what they had finally admitted out loud. Then came the moment that could become the biggest turning point yet. Your soulmate opened the message window again and began writing. This time, they didn't immediately delete it. They wrote about how long they had been thinking, how difficult it had been to express certain feelings, and how they didn't want to leave important words unsaid anymore. But before sending it, they paused one final time. They realized that reaching out wasn't about guaranteeing a certain response from you. It was about finally being honest. And that changed everything. The person who had been with them last night had unknowingly helped create this moment. The moment your soulmate stopped asking, "What if?" and started asking, "What happens if I finally try?" Don't skip now, because the next step is where this entire story reaches its emotional peak. Your soulmate has a message in mind, a reason for sending it, and one truth they've been holding back that could completely change the way you see everything that happened last night. The truth your soulmate was hiding wasn't about the person they were seen with last night. It was about what that conversation made them finally admit to themselves. After everything was said, they sat quietly with their phone in their hand and realized they had been protecting their pride at the cost of something far more meaningful. The person beside them had asked one simple question: if you could say anything to them right now, what would it be? And your soulmate finally answered without thinking about how it sounded. They said they would tell you that you still matter to them. They would tell you that the distance never erased what they felt. They would tell you that there were moments when they wanted to reach out but stopped because they didn't know whether you would welcome them back. Don't skip, because this is the part that explains why they were with that person in the first place. They weren't there to replace you. They were there because they needed someone to help them understand what their heart had been trying to say. But there was something even deeper. Your soulmate admitted that they had been watching for signs that you might still care, while secretly hoping you would make the first move. They now realized how unfair that was. How could they expect you to understand feelings they had never clearly expressed? That realization changed their entire perspective. They began thinking about every time they had chosen silence instead of honesty, every time they had acted unaffected when they were anything but unaffected. And then they said something that made the person beside them stop talking completely: "I don't want them to think I never cared." Those words revealed the fear underneath everything. Your soulmate wasn't simply afraid of rejection. They were afraid that their silence had already told you a story that wasn't true. Stay till the end, because something huge is waiting for you, and this next detail may be the clearest answer to the question you started this video with. Who were they with, and why did that meeting matter so much? Before tea.